reach it?
I read
And
it.
there's more trucks on the
I'm
road.
taking on one of them.
They need.
No, that's what I see compared to when I worked on that big drive down to Nestle and Lakewood.
Oh, yeah.
I see so many trucks.
Oh, no, they're short. Real quick, during the storm, they had 500 trucks stranded in trucking.
We're on.
Okay.
Roger, would you like to open up prayers?
Yes. Most gracious Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day that we can come and worship you and praise you and give you all the honor and the glory. We ask that thou continue to be with Scott as he gives us his lesson this morning. Help us to learn your word and we gain more knowledge of you and your will. We ask that thou continue to be with the church here at Galt and also be with those who are suffering from sicknesses or ailments or loss of loved ones. We ask that they continue to be with us always. We love you and need you always. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so today we're on Exodus chapters 5 and 6. They're a little less eventful than the previous ones, but we'll make up for that when we get to like chapter 12, it'll be really eventful. So, Joyce, would you like to start reading? Exodus 5.
Exodus 5:1. And afterward Moses and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, "Thus says Jehovah, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh said, "Who is Jehovah that I should listen to his voice to let Israel go? I do not know Jehovah, and I also will not let Israel go." And they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Jehovah our God. Otherwise, he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword."
Why don't you want to read the next one?
Then the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you trying to release the people from their work? Get back to your burdens." And Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now many, yet you want them to cease from their burdens?" And the same day Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as previously. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the quota of the bricks which they made previously you shall still place upon them. You shall not diminish any of it, for they are idle." Therefore they cried out, saying, "Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let the work be laid more heavily upon such men, so they do it and not pay attention to false words."
Ready?
Exodus 5 and 10. And the taskmasters of the people and their officers went out and spoke to the people, saying, "Thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you straw. You go and get your own straw, wherever you can find it, for none of your work will be reduced." So the people scattered throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the taskmasters pressed them, saying, "Finish your work, the same daily assignment as when there was straw."
Exodus 5:14. And the officers of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten and told, "Why have you not finished both yesterday and today the amount of bricks required of you previously?" Then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, "Why do you treat your servants this way? No straw was given to your servants, and they say to us, 'Make bricks.' And now your servants are being beaten, but it is the fault of your own people." But he said, "Idle is what you are, idle. Therefore you say, 'Let us go and sacrifice to Jehovah.' So go now and work, and no straw shall be given you, but you shall deliver the quota of bricks."
Ruth, or Joyce?
Exodus 5:19. And the officers of the children of Israel saw that they were in trouble when it was said, "You shall not diminish any of the daily assignment of your bricks." And they came upon Moses and Aaron, who were standing there to lead them, when they came forth from Pharaoh. And they said to them, Jehovah, look upon you and judge, because you have made us odious in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, so as to put a sword in their hand to kill us.
What do you want to read?
Exodus 5:22. Then Moses went back to Jehovah and said, Lord, why have you mistreated this people? Why is it that you have sent me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has mistreated his people, and you have not delivered your people at all.
Okay, so here it seems like it's actually God made it worse for the Egyptians. They were in slavery and they had taskmasters and they had responsibilities that they had to do, but because they went and asked to be let go, Pharaoh made it worse on them, and so their situation's gotten worse and not improved. Anybody have any questions or comments? How many days' journey into the wilderness did the children of Israel want to take?
3.
3. What's the significance of 3 days?
Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days.
Yeah. Because we're getting resurrected after the 3 days. What did Pharaoh do to the children of Israel after Moses and Aaron requested that he let them go?
Can I ask a question? Okay. To put that, this goes with Matthews, right?
Right now.
3 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it goes with, Jesus being in the tomb 3 days, yeah.
Okay, which was already, I am back then.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm putting it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so throughout here, we're going to see allusions to Jesus and his death and resurrection, especially when we get to chapter 12, there's the Passover, he institutes the Passover, and we're probably going to, instead of doing 2 chapters, we may do 1 chapter for a few weeks, because there's a lot in that chapter, and how it relates to Jesus and what he did, and how he fulfilled the Passover, he's the Passover lamb, and all this stuff that he was going to do. And so, yeah, this is one, he is the I am, God presented himself to Moses and to the children of Israel as I am, the eternal God, in the beginning of this. And Jesus did come and presented himself to Israel as he's Jehovah. I'm Jehovah, I am. And they rejected him. And so that he's going to essentially lead them in a 3-day journey because through his resurrection. And that's what we do each Lord's Day. We have a feast. We have a feast with him.
Okay. So what I'm getting an understanding of right now, okay, is of when I talk to people and I talk about the law and the times of grace. All right, you know how it is when you want to know what you're talking about. You especially display information where I talk about the times of the law and the times of grace, where where some of them had the understanding, and as well as myself, the time of Jesus. Jesus died on the cross, to where as far as music, okay, I've talked to some of the Baptists about what they say playing musical instruments in the church. And I said, Ephesians 5, 19 through 22. This is, they said, what about Psalms? Where we have and what I'm doing is that I'm saying that this is the time of grace. Right? And getting that understanding as I'm getting it right now, so I can be more stronger in delivering the message myself.
So what you're talking about then is that how to explain how things have changed since the Old Testament.
Yes, and then as far as, oh man, I'm divorced. I live with my new girl, And I said, I said 1 Corinthians 7, where it says a man should not touch a woman, and it speaks of divorce, and they're like, wow, man, but then some of them that know something of the wording can say, well, in the Old Testament, it says, it's in the Bible, man. It says, give a writing of divorcement. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
and
So what I would say is that the law didn't pass away or end. Sometimes people say, well, the law is no longer applicable because it's over. Well, Jesus actually said, I have come to fulfill the law, not one jot or tittle will pass away from it. So, and the point made by Paul and in the book of Hebrews is that the law was a shadow of things to point you to Jesus. And Jesus is the reality of those things. So, for example, the Passover. Do we need to keep the Passover? No, we don't keep the Passover the way that the Jews do. But in a sense, we do. Because what we're going to do later on is keeping the feast. Paul talked about keeping the feast without leaven, and he was referring to the Lord's table. So every Lord's Day, when we go in there, we are actually fulfilling or keeping the Passover. And so, and then there's other things from the law that clearly have not passed away. It says, you shall not murder. Well, I don't think anybody thinks that, okay, well, then Jesus came, it's cool, I can just kill somebody if I'm angry with them. So there's certain aspects of the law that obviously are still applicable today. But as far as doing these things, and you have to make these sacrifices, or you have to keep these different feasts, and we don't have to go to Jerusalem on the Passover. There's 3 times a year. I think it's the unleavened bread, and then Pentecost, and the Day of Atonement, that all the believers in Israel were required to go to Jerusalem physically to keep these. We don't have to do that. That's not something we do. We can eat whatever we want. So, they explained how we're not under these things, but at the same time, they haven't passed away. They've been fulfilled, and they are to direct us to something. So it's like building a model and giving you an instruction book so that you can find your way to this person. Well, once you found the person, you don't need the instruction book and the model anymore. And that's what the tabernacle and the temple and the law it was a model of what the reality would be, and an instruction book so that you would identify the person who that was. But once that person's there, you don't need the law book. But at the same time, certain aspects of it, like you shall not murder, you shall not kill your brother or whatever, those are, they're not, it's not like they passed away or that they're not in effect anymore. So they've been fulfilled. And then now they accomplished their purpose in directing you to the Lord.
okay, so we're talking about a template that has been fulfilled in the time of grace, basically. And
Yes, but it hasn't been completely fulfilled. There are aspects of that we'll get into that have to do with his return. So, for example, like the Passover. Has the Passover been fulfilled?
Passover was for the way it's in here, the Israelites had to put the blood on the doorpost, and that with the angel of death passed over the kill the firstborn of their family. That's what that pertains to, the Passover that Christ is. We're talking about Christ. That's not the same.
Christ is not the fulfillment of the Passover.
No.
It says that Christ is our Passover lamb.
Yeah, he's our Passover lamb. But right now we're under the law of Christ. We're not under the law of Moses.
I understand, but how has the Passover not been fulfilled?
Well, yeah, in a sense it's fulfilled, but we don't celebrate that feast,
No.
feast anymore.
Well,
The only thing that's moved from the Old Testament to the New Testament is the blood. You can't eat blood at all. That's the only thing that's not fulfilled.
they sacrifice to idols, but that's what they said in Jerusalem there. But even the things sacrificed to idols, Paul made a point that it doesn't matter.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether you sacrifice something to idols. So for example,
Well, yeah, I know, but I know what you say. We're not supposed to drink blood or eat blood.
so my point with the Passover is that Jesus is the Passover lamb. We'll look at this in more detail. He fulfilled that aspect. He fulfilled all of it. Some of it is not fulfilled yet. And so all these feasts have to do with both of his comings, the first and the second coming. And so there's some aspects of things that are not yet fulfilled. For example, one of the things of the Passover, you have to eat the Passover lamb. We have a part in the Passover. We eat it. And the whole thing has to be consumed for the morning. What that typifies is us believing. Whenever you believe, he said, unless you eat of me, you will not have it. If you eat of me, you'll have eternal life. So we're eating the Passover lamb. So in a sense, that's not complete yet, right? There's still people believing when they finish eating. So the Passover lamb hasn't been consumed completely yet. It also says that Paul said that we keep the feast without leaven. And so he's talking about the Passover. When we we don't do the Passover like they do at once a year on a certain day of the year, on the 14th of Nisan, which is, sometime around March, April. We don't do that. But every time that we go, because when Jesus instituted the Lord's table, that was the Passover. They were having the Passover supper. And he said, do this in remembrance of me until I come back. And it is fulfilled in the kingdom. So every time that we go into the other room in there and we partake of the table, we are keeping the Passover feast. That's how we do it. And it's to remember these things, all these feasts they were to remember what had happened, but they were also an appointed time to be ready for when the Lord would come. And so the Passover that they kept from the time of Moses until when the Lord came was so that they would recognize when he did show up that he was the fulfillment of that. And we are also declaring his death and remembering what he did by keeping the feast every Lord's Day. So it's different. It's not the same thing. We're not going to go kill a lamb. We didn't kill a lamb this morning, and we didn't wipe the blood everywhere. And we're not, going through all the rituals and things. But when we take that cup, that is part of the Passover.
Because Christ is the one who sacrificed his life. He was the perfect lamb.
Right.
Sacrificed.
He is the Passover lamb. It says that in the New Testament.
He is the one that sacrificed.
So
There's
when
the Old Testament, there's the New Testament. The Old Covenant, the New Covenant.
There's the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. But the Old Testament and the New Testament are interrelated. I mean, when you go into the New Testament, they're constantly reading the scripture and saying, this is how this is fulfilled. This is what this meant. When Jesus met the two Aramites, he took them through they didn't have the New Testament. He took them through the Old Testament and he showed them how everything was about him. And that's what, when you read the Gospels, for example, throughout there it'll say, and this day this is fulfilled. Or this is what Isaiah said, and now this is fulfilled. And then the disciples say, oh, and we remember this. When he got on the cross, and died on the cross, that is Psalm 22. He fulfilled Psalm 22. Part of it, Psalm 22. And part of that is also
That was prophecy. That was prophecy of his death.
Yeah.
The Old Testament was put there for our learning. And the Bible tells you that's scripture. And now we are under a new covenant, under Christ's covenant. But how do you fit this Passover you're talking about with Christ's death?
He was Christ. He's the Passover
Well,
lamb.
he's the lamb, but they didn't pass him over.
But they're passing us over. So they sacrificed the lamb, and whoever had the blood on their post. So if you put the blood, you sacrifice this lamb, you put the blood on your post, the Passover lamb, the judge, would take the firstborn, would pass over your house, and you would die.
Right.
Well, how's that apply to us? If we believe in Christ and essentially eat the lamb, his blood forgives us of our sin, and when that judgment comes, we will be passed over.
I see.
We will not be condemned to hell. Whereas somebody else who says, no, I don't believe Jesus is God, and I don't believe he was raised from the dead, I'm good. He doesn't have that blood. And when the judgment comes at the end, he will not be passed over, and he will be condemned. That's how he is the fulfillment of that blood. It was the Passover lamb's blood that saved the people.
And we
Right.
celebrate that
Firstborn.
every Sunday
It
through
didn't say,
communion.
it didn't say the people.
Right, it said the firstborn.
Firstborn of its family.
Right, but it saved them from death, and
Right.
it was the blood, and it's
Yeah,
the same
and
way
so-
that his blood saves us.
And that's one of those, that Moses, that's the last one of the plagues that they had. That they were to put that blood on their doorpost, and they were supposed to pass it over, so they didn't lose the firstborn of their family. Where the Egyptians lost their firstborn. So they went to Pharaoh and said, release these people, because we're, Jehovah is telling us that they gotta leave here, because we're dying for it. Basically, what I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But we'll look at this in great detail when we get there. That's chapter 12.
Right.
It's the Passover. It's 50-something verses long. It's a long chapter. We'll spend multiple sessions in this and looking at the different aspects of the Passover and what he did and deliverance and how that applies to us, how Jesus has fulfilled those things, how some of those things have not been fulfilled, and we have a part in those things. But we'll look in great detail and look at all the scriptures that go along with this at that point.
I just real quick, I want to know, which would, I guess me personally, it would help me a lot if, say for instance, because of my question and my questions, is it possible, say for instance, when we go through the lesson, you can say, okay, hey, this is part of this is some of the reference to the New Testament. So I'm able to.
Yeah, I try to do that. There's not, other than the 3 days, there wasn't really much in this chapter, but that is something that I intend to do.
I appreciate it.
Just like I did last week with the IM.
Because see, what it is that was like a red light, it went bing,
Yeah,
and I said, oh,
and so that's what we'll do when we get to, especially to, so starting in chapter 7, it starts the plagues. He's gonna start for the next 7 through 12 is these plagues, and like Roger said, the last one is the firstborn. And that has to do, that's when he gets into his Passover and thing. And so there'll be a lot of references to the New Testament, particularly when we get to chapter 12. Chapter 12, there's so much there that it'll take us.
it was just the 3 days that got me, yeah.
3 days is always a clue that it has to do with resurrection, because that's how long Jesus was in the grave. It was 3 days, 3 nights, and then he was resurrected.
It's also a reference to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
There's three.
Yeah, when there's 3 things, it's also a reference to God, the Godhead.
Okay.
So, and that is something that, their numbers are significant. They're symbolic in the Bible. 7 has a certain thing, and as we get through these things, we'll talk about those. Okay, thank you. Symbolism. Okay, so, did we answer number 2?
No.
What did Pharaoh do to the children of Israel after Moses and Aaron requested that? That's the question.
You increase their labor.
Yeah.
And then we got some straw, and go find their own straw, like their bricks together.
Yeah, he increased their burden. So why did he increase their burden?
Because it's Jehovah.
So they were lazy.
So they were lazy. If they got time to think about going to the wilderness to have a party, then they aren't working hard on themselves. What did Moses do after the officials of the children of Israel complained about the increased workload?
He chastised them because that their complaint to Pharaoh increased the kids, or increased Israel's burdens, and that they had not delivered the people.
He didn't believe in Jehovah.
Pharaoh, yeah,
He did not know anything about Pharaoh.
right. But what happened? The answer is what Moses did was he went to the Lord. He went to Jehovah. He's like, why did you mistreat? Why have you made this worse? You said you came here and said you were going to deliver us, and all you've done is made it worse for us.
Right, they don't even listen to me. I'm not supposed to do it.
Yeah.
You see, let's not listen to me. Pharaoh doesn't listen to me.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but this is the beginning of Pharaoh knowing about their God, the Israelites' God, but, not taking heed to it, because, in other words, it was the beginning of his understanding of who God was, or what he would say their God.
So what's gonna happen here is, this next chapter this has to do with Jehovah and Moses having an interaction. And then actually, starting when we get to 7 next week, it's going to be God basically introducing himself to Pharaoh through plagues, various different kinds of plagues that he's going to, so that he will know him as his power. Not the way we know him. We know him because of his love and his mercy, but Pharaoh is going to know him because of his power and his judgment. And that's going to start.
Because this is right now, I guess it's talking about the boldness of the people not to do what he tells them to do. The Pharaoh telling his people, the Israelites, how bold are they to not do what I tell them to do?
Well, they were doing what he told them to do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as the resistance that started to develop,
Yeah,
I guess.
he just
And then
basically said,
punishing them for that.
when Moses and Aaron came and said, let us go and have a feast to Jehovah, he's like, I don't know who Jehovah is. Who's this person? I'm not gonna. Basically, he didn't care. He dismissed them like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know Jehovah. I'm not gonna do that. And so we're gonna see that, because it talks about this in the New Testament, that God hardened his heart, and so that he would do this. He continues to harden his heart. He's gonna have these plagues, and then he's gonna harden his heart, and he's gonna continue to build and build and build and build and build until they come to a head with the firstborn are killed.
Okay.
So I think it is Juana's turn.
Exodus 6:1. And Jehovah said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. For because of a mighty hand, he will let them go, and because of a mighty hand, he will drive them out of his land. And God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Jehovah, and I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as the all-sufficient God. But by my name, Jehovah, I did not make myself known to them. And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojournings, in which they sojourned. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians have enslaved, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Jehovah, and I will bring them out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. And I will take you to myself as my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am Jehovah your God, the one who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am Jehovah.
Okay, and so this is one of the things, so we've been pointing out things that are attributes of God. This is one of the things that God does. He makes things so that they seem like they're impossible. He creates a situation where it seems as though there is no way this is going to happen. Like he'll say, this is what I'm going to do, and then he will make it so that the situation is like, well, there's no way that's going to happen. And then he will do it to show that he is the all-powerful one, and it is only by him that these things can be done. So there's no confusion on our part that maybe we did something. And so we're going to see that kind of a thing repeat throughout the book of Exodus and throughout the entire journey into the good land. He continues to have these situations where it seems like, if you look at it from a human perspective, like there's no way now this can happen. It's not working out. There's no way it can be done. But then he will do it. So, Ray, you want to read the next?
Okay, Exodus 6 and 9. And Moses spoke to the children of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses on account of anguish of spirit and harsh bondage. And Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, go speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land. And Moses spoke before Jehovah, saying, the children of Israel do not now listen to me. How then will Pharaoh listen to me, since I am of uncircumcised lips? And Jehovah spoke to Moses and to Aaron, and gave them a charge for the children of Israel and for Pharaoh and the king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt.
Kim, you want to read the next two, 14 and 15?
These are the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Hanok and Palu, Herzon and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. And the sons of Simeon, Jemiel, Jamal, and Jamin, and Ohad, and Jashan, and Zohar, and Shaul, the son of Hanine, woman. These are the families of Simeon.
And these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon and Gohath and Merari. And the years of Levi's life were 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni, Shemini, I don't know, according to their
You don't have to pronounce it.
families. And the sons of Gohath, Amram, Ishar, and Hebron, and Uziel. And the years of Kohath's life were 133 years. And the sons of Merari, these are the sons of the Levites according to their generations.
And so these three, the sons of Levi, are important because Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, these three families become responsible for different aspects of the tabernacle. The tabernacle is going to be built, and Aaron and his sons are going to be the priests, the high priests. These three have responsibility for certain. One of them had to break down the whole thing. So they set this whole thing up in the wilderness, and they stayed there, and then the Lord came in as a pillar of cloud. It was fire by night and cloud by day. And then they didn't know, sometimes the following day, or sometimes it might be a week, or sometimes it might be a month, or however long, the cloud would leave. When the cloud left, they had to carry everything down, and then they had to pack it all up in carts and all this stuff. And these ones were responsible for different aspects of that. The Kohath and Merari and Gershon. They had responsibilities, and so they weren't a priest that did the sacrifices and these types of things, but they did have some function and responsibility within the, related to the tabernacle. So that's why they're important. And Kohath, does anybody remember Kohath? No?
I don't
Isn't he the one from Jude?
know.
What was that guy's
The
name?
one from Jude that starts with the K is. Let me find it. Korah.
Oh, Korah.
Korah was from Jude.
Okay. I think Korah is maybe a descendant of Kohath or something. He's part of this. Korah? Is his name?
Korah.
Okay. So whose turn? You just read? Joyce, you want to read 20 and 21?
And Amram took Jochebed, his father's sister, for himself as wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the years of Amram's life were 137 years. Exodus 6:21. And the sons of Ishar, Korah and Nethan and Zikri, and the sons of Uziel, Mishael, and Elzaphan and Zithri.
Floyd, you want to take
And Aaron took Elisheba and the daughter of Amminadab, the sister of Nachshon, for himself as wife, and she bore him Nadab and Abihu. Eleazar, and Ithamar. And the sons of Korah, Asir and Elkanah, and Abisaph. These are the families of the Korahites.
Okay, so this is the Korah that is from Judah. Is this person?
The one that didn't like Moses and
Yeah, we wanted to take.
wanted to be a big shot.
Why you want to read the last part?
And Eleazar, Aaron's son, took for himself one of the daughters of Putiel as wife, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites, according to their families. It was this same Aaron and Moses to whom Jehovah said, "Bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies." It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. It is the same Moses and Aaron, and on the day when Jehovah spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, "I am Jehovah. Speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, all that I speak to you." But Moses said before Jehovah, "Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. How then will Pharaoh listen to me?"
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question, from the last verse. It says, "Behold, I am of uncircumcised lip. How then will Pharaoh listen to me?" All right, so what it was is that Pharaoh, earlier had, his daughter had raised, has raised Moses. And so
So
from
this,
that,
This is not the same Pharaoh though.
oh,
That Pharaoh died.
okay,
Because when Moses, he killed an Egyptian. When he was 40 years old, he killed an Egyptian. And that Pharaoh who was essentially his grandfather, found out about it and wanted to kill him. And that's why he went to the wilderness, and he was out there for another 40 years. So Moses is now 80 years old.
okay.
He was 40 years old, he left, he spent 40 years in the wilderness, and God told him to go back because the one that seeks your life has died. So that Pharaoh died, and this is a different Pharaoh. So Pharaoh is like Caesar. It's like a title. It's not a name of a person. So there's been, dozens,
Right.
a lot of different Caesars, and that's what they call it. It's like, the president. We have a president today. We had one named Trump, and then we have one named Biden, but they're not the same person, but they're the president. So Pharaoh is like that title.
Yes, so much.
This is 400, this is over 400 years after Joseph.
No, it's not that long. It was 430 years from when God made Abraham a promise. We're gonna look at that later on.
Okay.
But it's been hundreds of
Anyway,
years.
those other pharaohs died. There's probably two pharaohs before that died.
Yeah.
That's the reason why this is the new pharaoh. He didn't know, he didn't have any idea about Joseph.
Well, my question also was because God had given Moses, the power, before this year. And so I'm just, how you hear different things and people get a different interpretation, and then which brings a question. And so I was thinking, why would he care about being uncircumcised when God had given him the power earlier? It's just like, well, gee, this is what I want you to do.
That's a lack
And
of faith.
so, what's that?
That's a lack of faith. So he didn't have perfect. When we look at all of these characters, so you look in Hebrews chapter 11, right, and it says, "By faith, these ones did these things." It talks about Abraham. By faith, he left the land where he was raised, and he went to a place that he didn't know. Well, when you read the actual account, that's exactly what happened. He went to some other place, and then he went to another place, and God continually appeared to him. He had missteps, like God told him that he would have a seed, and so he and Sarah got a concubine and had Ishmael, not believing that he could give him a seed when he was old. But then later on, he believed. And it's the same thing with Moses. Moses doesn't quite, repeatedly he said this. He said it from the very beginning when he appeared to him in the thorn bush. Well, I don't know how to talk, and I'm not good at talking. And God was mad at him. Like, I'm the one that makes your mouth. I can make you talk. And he's like, no. He's like, fine, Aaron will talk to you. And he just continually says these things. Like, I can't talk. I'm an uncircumcised lips. They're not going to listen to me. And he's complaining to God. So this is a relationship they're going through. And God is building his faith and building his faith. And he's not quite there yet. And so that's what we're seeing. And so that's an example for us, even like Peter. Peter, I'm never going to deny you. Then he denied it.
Right.
And so we shouldn't think that we're saved. I believe that Jesus is God and God raised him from the dead, and I'm going to be perfect, and I'm never going to lack any kind of faith ever again, or I'm never going to do anything in unbelief. We are. Everybody does. We don't have perfect faith from the minute we believe. It's a process. It's a process of growing in faith. And this is what you're seeing here. Moses is like, I don't know. I can't go talk to Pharaoh.
I wanted to say, I don't know what version this is, but in the New American Standard, it says, but Moses said before the Lord, behold, I am unskilled in speech. How then will Pharaoh listen to me? That's what that uncircumcised was, which he explained. But they just put it differently here.
Okay.
So, and so he didn't have confidence. He was thinking about himself.
Yeah.
I can't do this. But
Right.
the point was, the Lord's point was, I'm the one that's doing it.
Right.
You just need to do what I say. Just be obedient and don't worry about that. And so he was looking at it from a perspective of himself and his human. And he had that experience where he kind of knew that he was going to be the deliverer of the people 40 years ago, but he had a misconception of how he was going to do that, and he killed the Egyptian, and he thought that they would recognize him, and they didn't want him. Who are you? You point us over, to break up an argument with us. Who put you ruler over us? And then Pharaoh wanted to kill him, so he's like, that's it. I'm keeping my mouth shut. I'm never talking again. And then God comes and says, okay, now you're going to go tell Pharaoh. And then he goes and tells him something that didn't work out. Like, he got worse. You said you were going to deliver him, and now they're burdens, and they're coming to me, and they're complaining to me, and I'm odious in their sight. This is not working out. Like, I just want to shut my mouth and sit over here in the corner, and you do what you're going to do and leave me alone.
So what it is that
Moses is doing.
Moses he was serious about what God wanted to do. I mean, he took that in a serious manner, and so he's like, his conscience bothered him upon God telling him certain things to do. It's like, well, how can I do that? Because I'm not on that. I haven't been certified to do that. But God says, this is what I'm telling you to do.
If God tells you to do something, that is the authority that you need. But he was going through a process where he was being broken down. He was very confident when he was young. He was the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and he thought that he could do these things. But he was thinking, I do it on my own. Just like Peter, I'll never deny you, because he had confidence in himself. And so the Lord broke that down. With Peter, he denied him 3 times, and then he built him back up. With Moses, it all went bad, and he had to go to the wilderness for 40 years to break him of his natural strength and his confidence and his natural abilities. And now he's broken. And now the Lord is going to use him because he's broken. Just like what Paul said, in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. And so that's one of the things that God does with all of us. We all have this natural confidence in our own, especially when we're young. We can do anything. God first needs to break that down so that we realize that we can't do anything. It's not us doing it. He's the one that's doing it. And he'll do it through us. But we just have to be obedient and listen to him. At the same time, not look at the situation and be like, I can't do that. But that's our natural thing, and he builds us. So that's the process he's taking about. I see.
It's, like when they were leaving Egypt, and he was with Moses and Aaron. He wasn't skilled in his speech.
That's what he claimed.
That's what he claimed. I mean, like Moses he didn't have confidence in himself to deliver.
Well, he would, and just like all of us, we rejected at first, then the Lord was insistent, he says, You're what I asked you. Or just like Jonah, he didn't want to, he was going to direction, but yeah, that's going the right direction, he did what he did, but and he still rejected it after he got done doing it. And then it,
Yeah.
you know,
Tells them not.
so, but this is, it's a buildup of faith. What, it's just like he said,
Training exercise.
he's training him to do what he says because he's all sufficient God. He can do anything he wants to. He can speak anything and do it. And he spoke this earth into being heard. So
He's in the past used a donkey to
Yeah.
tell somebody something, like he can do, Jesus said when he presented himself as the king to Jerusalem, and the people were saying Hosanna, and the Jews were like, no, stop, the chief priests and all the Pharisees are like, stop those people. He said, if they stop them, the rocks will start saying it. Like, he can make anything come. He can do anything he wants. He can use anybody he wants. And so that's the point he's making here, is that he's the all-sufficient God. He's the one that's doing this. He's making the situation seem impossible. It's gonna get worse. In the next few chapters, it's gonna build and build and build, be worse and worse and worse. And then he's gonna deliver. And even when he delivers, it takes him to a point where it looks like, well, you just led us to the ocean, and we're gonna die.
Yeah,
Increase his task.
Yeah, he just increases the degrees of difficulty, increases and increases and increases. So you realize that there is no way this is gonna happen, and it only can happen because God's the one that does it.
And similar to the God told Jesus, I will tell you what he says.
Yeah, and also he did the same thing with the disciples. Don't worry about what you say. I'll give you the word.
That's why it's in the Bible.
That was an Acts.
That's an act.
That's an Acts. Okay.
All right, so, we only have about 10 minutes. You want to do the questions or?
Up to you, you're the teacher.
Okay.
You're in control.
Did God make himself known to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob by the name of Jehovah?
Yeah.
No, he did not. He was the all-sufficient God to say. He introduced himself as Jehovah to Moses. What did God hear and what did God remember in verse 5?
He heard from the Israelites. He heard their groaning.
He heard the groan.
And then he remembered their promise he made to them.
He remembered his covenant that he had made. And what did God say he would redeem the children of Israel with? This is verse 6.
Outstretched arm and the great axe.
Great axe of judgment. So he would redeem them with an outstretched arm and a great axe of judgment. And what did God promise the children of Israel in verses 7 and 8?
To the land which promised Abraham.
He said that he would take them to himself as his people, and that he would be their God, that they would know him, and that they would know that I am Jehovah, your God, the one who brought you out of the burdens of the Egyptians, and that he would take you to the land that he had sworn to Abraham.
Okay.
And give it to them as a possession.
In here, in the Hebrew text, is Jehovah there, Yahweh?
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, so I used Yahweh last week. Yahweh is like it's called like the transliteration. So it's the Hebrew. It is the real Hebrew. So if you want to say what he's saying to Moses, he's saying he's Yahweh. Jehovah is like, I think it's the Latin version of that. And so really his name is Yahweh.
So that's the question. Like the first one that God made himself known to Abraham, it was Yahweh. Right?
Yahweh.
Yeah, that's what
Yes, it was Yahweh. And that's what Jesus would have said to Jews, Yahweh. And they would have known. They knew what he was saying. They got it. Remember from last week? They didn't quite catch it the first couple times he said it, but then when he said before Abraham was, I am, they picked up stones to stone him because they knew what he was saying. You're saying you're Yahweh. You're the one that fears Moses. your God. You're saying, that's what you're saying, so they want to stone him. That was blasphemy, if it wasn't true. Okay, did the children of, why did the children of Israel not listen to Moses?
Because they were anguish of spirit and under harsh bondage.
Yes. Because of their bondage they didn't live. And what kind of lips did Moses have?
Untrained, uncircumcised.
Uncircumcised, untrained, yes. And who are the sons of Levi?
Gershon, Merari,
The three that are going to, you see them. Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your questions. That makes the study better.
Thank you, Scott. You're a good teacher.
Thanks.
I have a better understanding too. Yeah, that was great.